Happy New Gentlemen and listeners of the Christ Over Fear podcast. I'm your host, Chad Jenkins, and it is January 3rd, 2024, bringing in the new year on the new Wednesday with a new guest for episode 39 of Christ Over Fear. Excited to get into 2024 and get going with this. I hope everybody had a wonderful Christmas, wonderful holiday season, and now everybody's looking to get after it here in 2024. I have a special guest today, somebody who was a classmate of mine at West Point, as well as a fellow Army football brother of mine. And then on top of that, Jon Hall, he's our guest today on Christ Over Fear, but he was also a quarterback alongside with me. And I think that bond and having somebody that, is intricately a teammate and in the same, QB room, it's special. Connor Crehan, I coached him. I was a graduate assistant, so I've never had actually a fellow QB that was when we're quarterbacks together. So it's going to be special today for Jon and I to be able to come on here. Jon came straight into West Point, where I went to the prep school. So we met as freshmen or plebes at West Point. And he's always been somebody that has had tremendous character, had tremendous just a moral compass that you knew was right, and somebody to emulate and look up to. Even and I've shared on this show numerous times. I was a heathen until my senior year at West Point, until being at Anthony Miller's funeral and his pastor giving that sermon that I'll never forget, that saved my life because I dedicated my life to Christ at that point. But prior to that, I was still a heathen, still lost. But Jon's one of those that are typical to Omari Thompson or Eris Como, somebody who I knew was a follower of Christ, but they didn't judge me. They didn't look down upon me. They tried to bring me to the light in a way that was graceful and with tact and with love, and at 19, 20, 21, for a male, it's kind of hard to see that. But now that I'm 44 and can look back upon that, that's what it was from. It was from leading with love. And he's done that his entire life. So Jon was a field artillery officer once he graduated in 2002. He does have combat deployments under his belt. He's now a senior marketing executive in the business world. He went to the University of Chicago for his MBA. He also has a master's from Northwestern University. And among that, probably one of the titles that he would cling to the most is that he's the proud father of 5 boys, ages 16 to 2. We'll ask him about that. He also runs Modern Day Knights LLC, which is kind of a football quarterback, football development youth program in the greater Chicago area. So the man wears multiple hats, but the one that's closest to his heart is that he's a follower of Christ, and I can't wait to have him on. So without further ado, let me bring my man, Jon Hall, up on here. What's up, buddy?
Oh, man, it's good to see you, Chad. It's good to see you. You mentioned some names back there that, man, those are Omari, Como, some folks near and dear to my heart. And honestly, Chad, for years I've been kind of wondering, when did Chad kind of come to Christ? And I was at that funeral, Anthony Miller's funeral. I was there with you. We were there. I remember the pastor kind of bringing people up. I never knew that was kind of the moment for you, Chad. That's like special to me because I was in the crowd with you and felt that same connection when we were there at Anthony's funeral.
Well, and here's the thing on that, Jon. For years, I was still living in shame and still living in, not being authentic who I was at that point in time. Because for me, and now it took me years, it took me until 2017 to finally admit to others that was when truly I know that the Holy Spirit indwelled me at that moment when I surrendered, because I didn't live my life. I still was, as I've said, we can give him 95% of us, we can give him 99.9% of us, but until we truly give him 100% of us and surrender everything to him, that's when the good comes to surface. And in my walk, at least, that it might not be the case for everyone. So in 2002, it was February of 2002, I still wasn't where I gave him 100% of me, but I know that's where where I knew I had to surrender to him. So anyways, that's a little bit about the what, but yes, I mean, and I don't know, I mean, his pastor got up there and kind of a brimstone and fire, and he got after it, but I walked up there. I was one of the ones that I walked up because I just was overcome with, the Holy Spirit that was in the room that day. And that's what, we look back, right? And Anthony Miller, a kid that was 2 years younger than us, but what a powerful kid that the Lord used in so many of our lives, right? And the Jon Halls, the Eris Comos, the, Omari Thompsons, the Ben Edgars. I mean, the Alton McCallums. I mean, all those guys, you included in that group, how he uses, each and every one of you to touch the lives of others. That's awesome.
100%.
Yeah. So that's what I want to know. So I kind of give you, but I want to know on Jon Hall's walk. I mean, how did you, from Michigan, the great state of Michigan, I can say that being here in Ohio, you guys whipping it. But how did you get into West Point, get into Army? How'd you choose that route out of high school? I know you have 5 boys, one of which, Landon, I've seen his film, and he's a complete stud as a freshman in high school. Unbelievably talented, 6'2", threw for over 2,300 yards, I believe, this year. So how did Jon Hall make that trek, and what did that look like for you?
Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, a couple of things kind of coming out of high school that like, I really are very interesting kind of looking back in hindsight. Like I grew up Catholic. And sports was always a big part of, in competitive activities, always a big part of kind of what we were into. Football in particular, something about football was really special. That before the season workouts, the grind of what we used to call Hell Week, the uncertain, like the certainty that if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to get injured. And the only way to like really kind of play the game well is to play in unison, have the skills, have the fundamentals, have the strength, and play as a full team. And so, something early on, I knew football was going to be a big part of my life kind of going forward. Was Sunday school, every Sunday, baptized as a baby, confirmation in 8th grade, read the Bible in high school, but really never understood it. Didn't really understand. The only thing that really stuck out to me, Chad, was like the book of Job. And I just remember thinking, holy cow, like this is like really bad times. And it's interesting reading it 20 years later and actually really understanding it. Right. And didn't have a ton of options coming out of high school, like Division II type stuff. And, had a coach call me and say, hey, have you ever named Steve Adler, Coach Adler, my baseball coach? And he was a history teacher. And he, this is late in my senior year, as I kind of realized Division I opportunities were not going to like really play out, and a couple scholarships for Division II. I still know I wanted to play the game. And he was teaching history in sixth or 7th grade. And a student asked him and said, hey, like they were teaching about West Point Military Academy. And they said, well, what type of student goes there? And he had said, hey, that, John, our quarterback at the high school, like that's the type of student. So he called me, and I kind of fell in love with the idea of serving the country and going to like a leadership environment. And fortunately, really the football program was one that kind of pulled me in. And I was kind of sitting there between going to prep school and coming straight in. And in hindsight, I think I, learned a lot of that first year and some of the struggles that you're going to have as a plebe at West Point. And I did struggle for sure. As we came in and we met for the first time, you're coming in from the prep school and I'm kind of coming in and coming off that Beast Barracks training and I was struggling. And so if you kind of remember, as we were all kind of starting that West Point story, I kind of struggled my first year and then went down and played on the lightweight team for a number of years. But like I had this connection with like you and Edgar and Woodruff and Henderson and I wanted to come back and be a part of the kind of the brothers that I came in with and kind of walked back on going into our spring season and had a chance to play with you and Curtis and Reggie and all those guys and Coach Bond. And it's a part of my life that like I really cherish. Like the thing that, many people have talked on here, like just that kind of sense of brotherhood and camaraderie and knowing that we are going to go through tough times in the game of football, but then also that, as you've said, the game of football kind of is very similar to the game of life, and you go through struggles and you kind of come together, as brothers and look out for each other and help each other through these tough times. And so, yeah, it was not exactly kind of the football experience that I kind of envisioned, but it was something that, I cherish. And I look back at some of our pictures and have followed you through the years and, been so like just looked up to you and what you've been doing on Christ Over Fear, what you did and, in the military and after the military and seeing you on TV. And it's just, I'm just glad to have been a part of that with you and a lot of the other guys that we got a chance to hang out with. And interestingly, I share that kind of Catholic upbringing with you because, senior year, what are we about, 19, 20 years old, I was in a Bible study with Dan Horst, you probably remember, and Omari. Yeah. And I'm in this Bible study, right? And,
wait a minute, who was Dan?
Dan Horst.
Yeah, he's been a guest on here.
Oh gosh, I gotta go back and look at that one. Great guy.
That's awesome.
So Dan Horst and Omari, right?
Yeah.
They're in this Bible study. We're sitting in like one of the barracks, and we were the company F2 Zoo, and I remember Omari being convicted that he was going to heaven. And I remember being offended. Like literally, this is a moment in my life where I was like, how does I'm following the rules. I'm going to Catholic church every Sunday. Like I'm doing but I really didn't have a relationship with God through Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Omari was like, I'm going to heaven. Like, no doubt. Like I'm going, like, son, deal's done. And I'm like, but you didn't do how do you I see your flaws, you're not perfect, right?
Right.
By the way, he is almost perfect.
He's pretty close.
He's pretty close to perfect, yeah. And so that is what I think opened my heart to be like, wait a minute. You can have a relationship with God directly. You don't have to kind of go through these rules and these laws and this priests. And that's a moment in my life. I've never thanked Omari for that, but I hope someday here soon to kind of reach back. I keep seeing him on the Army Navy kickoff return.
Oh yeah, I know. They show that highlight a lot. What year was that, John? What year was that?
That was our senior year. So
okay, so it was
right around when you were. It was probably, honestly, Chad, it was probably a few months after Anthony's funeral.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, Omari was, because he ran our FCA, he would run, Saturday mornings before the game when we'd meet down in the conference room, he would run that. But what a light though. What a light God has used in him to have that. And I love that you described that. And I love that your vantage point, I love the authenticity of it, that you were offended, right? Because I've been there before I was completely on or completely solidified and trusting the word of God and what it says, not what others say, but that we've been there. But then when you can reflect and look back upon it and be like, man, I love what you just said. You're like, I've never thanked him, but I need to thank him.
I need to thank him.
Yeah. Right. I mean, how cool is that?
100%.
And how he uses those individuals in our lives to draw us to him, which is pretty special.
Awesome.
So that sounds like that was a pivotal moment in your life. And you're like, okay, I want what he has. I want that relationship. And then how did it work once you graduated, once you decided to go field artillery? What was, because I will tell you, John, that's what I love doing this show too. And there can be guests that I've known for years, like you and I, or it can be individuals that I don't really know and they've reached out or we've coordinated or somebody's done an intro and I don't know their story. But like this, I get to hear your story in him, what he's done in your life, because we don't lead with that, right? We don't lead. I wouldn't even say men. I know people in general don't lead with their faith story, right? Because sometimes it's so intimate and so personal that we don't share it. I think that's part of this show is because I wanted to capture those stories because I think they're the most pivotal. They're the most critical story we could ever have in our life. And they need to be captured because they can invigorate somebody else who maybe is on the fence and don't know what they're missing, or they know they're missing something that they don't know what it is. So it can connect the dots with folks. But I guess I say,
and Chad, you know, you, as you started Christ Over Fear, you talked about like, you know, women are doing a lot of the heavy lifting out in the world right now, right? You know what I'm saying? And like, man, we got to pick it up, right?
Right.
And I think we've got a bit of a stubborn, kind of boneheaded, like we know it. We're like so trying to control everything. I think that like
Yeah.
it's generally fair, at least what I've experienced. And it's late in life that we realize that like that moment with Omari was very impactful. Like the moments that we had together in football, very impactful. And we got all these moments, and it's not until you look back and you're like, oh my gosh, like all of these people, like I don't know, are the angels, like all these people
Yeah.
that are surrounding you that are really, really helping you out and guiding you in the right direction. At some point in time, the light bulb goes off, and you're like, huh, maybe I should start listening to people that have a little
Yeah.
bit more time than I do. Maybe
Mhm.
people who are kind of reading out of the Bible and giving me information and providing wisdom and insights. Maybe I should start listening a little bit. And
Right.
once those kind of walls start to break down and that kind of, to your point, kind of go from that 99.9 to the true 100% in your
Right.
heart. Like I'm still trying to get there.
Yeah.
I think that's a bit where the joy of life sits. It's not
Mhm.
wealth, it's not money, it's not power. It's actually
Yeah.
sitting like we all have it. It's in us.
Right. Right. We do. Yeah, you're right. And I think that goes back to the Omari. Like once we realize that, hey man, we have won this fight because he won it for us.
Yeah.
It's nothing that we did. It's nothing that we've earned. It's nothing that we can do tomorrow or today or the next day after. But sitting in that and having, I used to always think contentment was a dirty word. Like I never understood contentment
Yeah.
on the because I was like, that sounds like laziness. That
Yeah.
sounds like, that sounds like mediocrity. And that's not what contentment is, knowing that the story's already written. He's already won, and I'm part of that victory.
Yeah.
Like you're part of
100%.
that victory. We're part of that victory. So let's go forth. Let's be bold. Let's be fearless. And let's grab as many as we can, because that's
100%.
all we get. That's all we get for eternity, is that it's the only binary thing that's out there. It's one or the other, right?
Yes.
And so having that conviction and having that contentment of knowing where our destiny is, where our eternity is. But John, here and I mean, you invigorate me right now. Hopefully I'll invigorate you some way during this, hour long discussion. But at the end of the day, like, tomorrow's tomorrow. Like, am I going to have that same conviction and invigoration to grab those? I hope, but I stumble, I fall short every day. That's why I need them every day.
100%. But Chad, you got to keep doing what you're doing, because when people see you out there, I mean, it brings like folks out to want you like hearing you meet with, people in Christ Over Fear makes me want to go do something like what Chad's doing. Like I need to grab more people. You're grabbing people. I need to grab more people. So just know you're having a bigger impact on men all across the world, probably, than you might even give yourself credit for.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I mean, sometimes it doesn't feel like that. So I appreciate that on that front. I just hope that we can have raw, transparent, real conversations about Christ that aren't fluff, that aren't
Yep.
that aren't from the pulpit on a Sunday, that sometimes might not speak to an individual, but a real, transparent conversation of battle hardened men, not necessarily always in combat, but just battle hardened by life. But they're willing to come on like you have to say, hey, this is where I'm at. This is what he's done in my life. This is a high. This is a low. This is where I'm at. But you know what? I've got him. And at the end of the day, outside of our relationship with him and then having our family, you're the father of 5 boys. I mean, I can't wait to hear about that. I can't wait. Can you share a little bit about that? Like, how does John go from, all right, your field artillery, we're going to have to hear your marriage story with your wife and all that. And how have you grown, your young men up to hopefully have that relationship as well?
Yeah, never in a million years would I have thought I was going to have like 5 boys. A high school girlfriend who's incredibly like constantly in the Bible. Like, I mean, like, I'm convinced there's a God because of like this human that like is walking this earth, and like I just want to be more like her. And you know, we actually got married. You met her, Rachel, at some of our kind of dances that we had at West Point. And when we you know, when we left the West Point and did all of our kind of officer training, all that stuff, that was right, as you know, it was right at the beginning of the wars. And so, you know, I was heading out to Colorado Springs, 4th Infantry Division, thinking I was going to do some, you know, snowboarding and mountain biking with a bunch of buddies. I mean, I remember Ryan Kistner was out there. He's a year ahead of us, and was like, you know, bring your mountain bike. And before I know it, you know, I'm in a, you know, Martin Luther King Day, 2003. I'll never forget it. I hadn't even signed into my unit yet and met my soldiers yet. And I was called into like a 0800 meeting. I hadn't even like seriously signed in. Captain Colasano calls me. He's like, Lieutenant Hall, you need to be there. And I walk in, there's like 40, 50 officers in this room. And I'm just disoriented. And this guy named Colonel Springman walks out, and he's like, fellas, we just got, you know, off the phone with the White House. We got our orders. We're going to, you know, take Tikrit, the most heavily fortified city in the world. And it was like, whoa. It's like, this is like the world's spinning. And she was my girlfriend at the time. And my first phone call wasn't to her or to parents. It was to my realtor. I was like, I just bought a house, and was like, hey, can I take this back? And he's like, you're screwed, dude. Like, you know,
no,
so a couple
collecting your commission.
So you made like three weeks later, I think like 3-4 weeks later, Dan Horse, who's out in Colorado, and Brad Hunt, another guy at West Point, played football player. I ran to the Justice of the Peace and got married. And a couple of weeks later, boom, we're off. We were part of the shock and all that was supposed to come in on the north side from Turkey, and got rerouted. And we kind of started like different. She stayed there in Colorado, started teaching. And, you know, I was having, you know, the honor and privilege of leading soldiers in Iraq. And after a year of that, we stayed a full year. After a year of that, came back, you know, artillery kind of transitioned to almost like infantry armor type operations, just because the battlefield was so wide. And after a year, came back, and then had a new role. We called it like the Colt platoon role. It was like a brigade recon role, and I had to go get Ranger qualified for it. So between, you know, I think the day, you know, honestly, Chad, you may remember this, the day I got back, you know, one of my good friends, Mike Adams, who was one of my Zoom mates, company mates, he was killed with the 3rd ACR on his way out of Iraq. And Rachel woke me up like crying because she had got the news. I'd just gotten back. And then not long after that, we got orders to go back again. And so went to Ranger School, went through that, which was an awesome experience. Learned a lot about, as you probably can imagine, as you did as well, myself and leadership abilities, conditions, and then went back for another year-long deployment. Where at the end of that deployment, I ended up starting to do marketing in Iraq. That's actually how I got into like my more professional, like the corporate side, was doing marketing in Iraq, which you got to talk about because that's where we crossed paths. So coming back from that experience, so I think it was like first 36 months of marriage, I was out of the state of Colorado for 27 or 28 months, something like that. So coming after all that, we kind of had to restart, and decided that we were gonna start having kids and all that stuff. And you know, fast forward a couple of years, and we've got, you know, 4 boys. We're feeling like, okay, we can handle this. Okay, we're done. We're at the end of the rope here. And not long ago, COVID, we had ourselves a little trip to Mexico, a little surprise. We used to call them, you know, Oopsie
Little
Koopsie.
Bambino.
And now we're calling him Super Cooper. But yeah, we got a little 2-year-old I'm still changing diapers, man.
Yeah,
so
buddy.
I got to go back. I got to share a little bit of that kind of marketing story with you, because that's where we cross paths. I don't know if you know that.
All right, I do want to hear that. Is this the Samara, where you were in Samara?
This is when I was in second time in Iraq. I was in Adwar, Iraq.
Adwar, okay.
2-9 Cav. And I had just gone from like what they call like the Big Balad Air Force Base. I was kind of a night battle captain at the time. Big Balad, a big Air Force base right there, southeast of Samara. And I'm in Adwar, you know, where they found Saddam. And
hey, can you hold on real quick? Hold on, I got to just say this. And we're coming to the marketing story right after this, but I want us to capture, because there's a bunch of other guys like us that do listen to this show. And I think um, just hearing what you described, I think we need to, you know, we need to thank Jesus for our spouses, for our wives,
Yeah, 100%.
because what you just shared, regarding Rachel, and she moves out to Colorado, doesn't probably know anyone really, or many at all. She's from Michigan. She marries you, heads out there, justice of the peace. You take off to go to a foreign land, Iraq. She finds a teaching job. You come home from a year deployment, say, well, now, honey, I'm going to Ranger school. That's another 60 days at best that
If
you're
you're
not
lucky.
going to hear from me. Yeah. If you're lucky, that you're not going to hear from me. And then when I come back from that, I'm going to get ready. I think you said 27 or 28 of your first 36 months in Colorado, you were gone. I mean, if we don't pay tribute, I don't know if tribute's the right word, but I mean, if we don't truly recognize as men how blessed we are in our lives, and how he has blessed us with those unions, and pick the perfect mate for us, man, I tell you what, that, because there's too many that have done that very similar path, right? And probably are still doing that. The spouses of the active duty military who are carrying the burden, that we can go follow and pursue and continue our dreams of leading men, or leading corporations, or leading whatever we're doing in our professional worlds, to do that. So I just wanted to say that, because that's pretty remarkable when you just sum that up real quick, and it stuck out in my mind of what a great addition we have in our lives.
And if she was here, I think she would tell you that, like, it was Christ over fear that got her through everything, kind of kept her, focused, and, she was able to kind of create community of other believers around her. And, if you remember, like, just writing notes, I remember getting notes that, like, free mail, like when I got that note, like in Iraq, and just kind of just sharing about our experiences, like just through letters over, months, years, like, and I think that, very much like her belief in Christ is what, kept her comfortable and calm and full of hope through those time periods.
Right. So thank you for sharing that. I just wanted to capture that too, because it was amazing just to hear you share it. And then, all right, so you're at Dwar, you're, where Saddam was found a couple of years prior to that. Give us the rundown of how Jon Hall becomes Marketing Hall.
Yeah, this is cool. Yeah, so I'm kind of moving over to like a field support, captain, field support officer, fire support officer role, right, in a squadron, in a Cav squadron. And I show up from the Balad Airface to Adwar. It's maybe an hour and a half away, and dropped in there by Chinook or Blackhawk, something like that. And I walk into like the tactical operations center, and one of the first people I see is Brian Horvath. That big D lineman, Brian Horvath. You remember he was a year behind us. I mean, I just wanted to get. I mean, he's so huggable. Like,
right.
And so he was there. A bunch of Adam Ravat, McCombs, a bunch of other guys I knew from West Point, and so immediately you have that kind of sense of calm. And I meet the colonel, Lieutenant Colonel Latique, and he's like, "Hey, you're going to be a non-lethal officer." And I'm like, "What? Like, what's a non-lethal officer in combat?" Like, this guy named Nick Stankovich, who was in the IRR that got called back in, and he was like an early '90s West Point guy, and he was like, "I think he wants you to do marketing." So Chad, essentially we had been building the Army and police force for years. And nobody was really, none of the like local population of this town of 20,000 people, nobody was really calling 911. So like we're getting RPG attack, roadside bomb attacks. We're patrolling pretty much 24/7. We're all out there trying to maintain presence and kind of help doing things from, providing security so government leaders could, do what they need to do, and just, fixing generators, fixing schools, standing up hospitals. And nobody was like reporting any type of insurgent activity. So he's like, your job is to get them to start calling basically the 911 number. And so we ended up investing most of the coalition resources that we had into like taking an old radio station and putting the antenna up. It was about the size of half a football field, pretty big. It was up into Crit, so we would kind of go, around the river and up to Crit, and then broadcast to Crit, northern Samara, and then into Adwar, and we turned it into a radio show. So like my lieutenant colonel would come on the air, and I would write the talking points. And we'd have a police chief or religious leader, and it'd be translated live. And you're from Ohio, so it may have not got to you, but in Chicago, there's an old '90s radio show called B96 96.3. Eddie and Joe. And I remember thinking, okay, they used to have people call in, so let's have people call in. And so on a weekly basis, it was something like a Tuesday or Wednesday at 1:00, huge antenna, like the insurgents know that like the colonel's gonna be there. So we put up billboards all over. I was doing like creative development for billboards. I had no idea what I was doing. Started a newspaper, writing talking points for the patrol leaders to go out, and they'd hand out radios. And after a couple of weeks, people started to call the 911 number and report like locations of weapon caches and bombs. And like, we were basically using marketing communications to connect with the local population, who then the call to action was to, call and we'll come and help you. It's all about kind of peace and prosperity for the next generation. So that's where I got into marketing. And in fact, there was probably 3 or 4 weeks into it, I was kind of there, just kind of monitoring the colonel, talking to one of our, police leaders. Soldiers are outside pulling security, and sure enough, the insurgents start attacking this radio show. So we knew it was working. We were attached to the 101st at the time, and so we got like Apache helicopters and bigger Bradley fighting vehicles to kind of come in and pull security while we would bring the colonel in on a weekly basis. But it was about that time I was at one show. And I come back from it, and see if you remember this, because you were at the Ranger Battalion at the time, and I think you guys were
it was probably 05 or 06.
05, 06, right in there, 05, 06. And I had just come in off of one of those missions, and Brian Horvath was either, he was running like tactical operations, he was in the talk, and he's like, dude, you're never gonna believe who was just here. I'm like, who? He's like, dude, your boy Chad Jenkins was here. And so your Ranger platoon came in and had a big mission that was going on. And I never got a chance to connect with you, but like we were right there. And I just remember like longing for like just to say hi, see how you're doing. I think we provided some type of broader security as you guys went in and did your mission. But the thing I remember him mostly, he was like, man, Chad's been doing a ton of missions. He looks really, really tired. I know you guys
that would probably be accurate.
Around, and you had the very serious missions, and we were right there, like in Iraq, near each other.
So where was all right? So I'm trying to think, because it wasn't out towards Bakuba, was it? Do you remember Bakuba?
It was not. You made So later on, you then come back again in Bakuba. So we went from Adwar, where you guys came in, did a mission, a big HVT you were going after. And then later, we then moved out to Bakuba, where then you came in again. I think that's actually where Brian was like, man, he was dog tired. He looked real tired.
Yeah, well, we came out and we did 72 hours of operations out of that one. And it was always messed up because we were sleeping during the day and doing ops at night. And we had an operation that, we had an operation that the main colonel, I can't remember his name. He was not very happy with me. I mean, and it was nothing. It was, we were in the right of what we had to do on target that night, but some bad individuals got killed, and they were trying to use it as propaganda, and it really wasn't. But so I remember that would have been my last. I think that was my last deployment. I think that was the one. And I was ground force commander and acting company commander of BCO 275. So we were I was between Tikrit and Balad and running all, man, those do bring back some memories though. I mean, I wish I could say I wasn't dog tired during those operations, but that'd be that, you think about that though. John, and sometimes like now it's what, 2024. I just said it on the show earlier. Like sometimes doesn't when you reflect back, I mean, it seems like a different world, a different time frame. I mean, just the weight of what we were carrying. And I think it was because of I know for me, the weight was my guys, the weight was uh truly their lives, like never wanting to lose any of their lives. I mean, I carried that more than anything else. I mean, that some people say, oh, mission men, something else, I can't remember, but me, it was always men. It was men before the mission even. And that might have been wrong in the army doctrine and everything else, but I think at the end of the day, I think guys knew that. And so maybe that carried a little bit of street cred too, that I put them before anybody else, any
100%.
mission, anything.
Totally. And I'd be remiss if I didn't like draw this connection. For me, agree with everything you're saying 100%. But when I look and kind of ask myself, how was I able to kind of like lead in that environment? There's no doubt in my mind that my football experience from young levels to high school, and then even especially like some of the grind we had to go through at Army, like there's no doubt, like that's what I drew on, like the hell weeks, the grind, the mental preparation before a game, the whole brotherhood coming together to move that football or to kind of stop the ball, and just the whole mentality around football, like that was what was in my head when I was in Iraq for those couple of years. And so as I got and along with what you said about your men, 100%, I also had a longing for like starting a family someday. And so it was like, and I know they did, my men did. Right. And so like,
Right.
there was also this, like, I want to do our mission and then get everybody back safe.
Yeah.
And to kind of have that opportunity to start a family. And so between football and family, and coming back from that experience, like I had to get involved in some sort of like coaching or investing in kids at a young level, at a young age. I kind of, I told you I had these boys that started, as they were growing older, they were like liking football, and I read a book once. I don't know if you've read this book, but you got to check it out. It's called How to Raise a Modern Day Knight.
Okay.
A phenomenal book, and it's all about kind of creating a brotherhood around these young boys and teaching them what it means to be a man. And it's so applicable to this day. Like right now, kids are growing up, and there's so much confusion around them, and we as men have to like be clear, like have to give them guidance, have to teach them how to understand and learn and follow Jesus. And I think it's for me, that's all kind of tied together from leading soldiers in combat to wanting to get back to football, to kind of having these boys that are playing football. And then like, I heard you talk about coaching your son, your sixth grade, seventh grade son. And like, man, like talk about joy.
Yeah, I
like,
know.
Man,
it is, isn't it?
Pass the knowledge and don't make the mistakes I made. And in fact, Chad, you come up a lot with my boy, my son, Landon. I tell him about you all the time. I'm like, man, the guy that was the starting quarterback, Chad Jenkins. I said, one of the things that blew me away about Chad was Chad. My wife was sitting there. She'd be like, yeah, he says it all the time. Chad knew the game of football. Like you knew the X's and O's, like sitting in those film rooms and listening to you and Coach Bond talking about like what you're going to do if they throw this defensive scheme. And I remember like it being so much more advanced. And so with my kid, I'm like, hey, like he can read, he's a freshman. He can read all 8 defenses.
Yeah.
Zone, understands how to pre-snap, post-snap read. And a lot of that has to do with me passing that on because I saw you in the film room. So I thank you for that, man.
Yeah, well, it's funny because my goodness,
right?
I remember. Well, it's funny that you just mentioned pre-snap, post-snap because Bryce and I were watching with the Washington Texas game, and we were down in Florida. We were in a hotel and we're watching it, he's like, Dad, he's like, I do my pre-snap reads, but I don't really do post-snap. I go, I know. I go, I wanted you work on pre-snap. You had that. But I go, now this coming year, this is what we're going to work on is post-snap reading and pocket presence. I want
Yes.
pocket presence and which Landon has that. I saw him sliding in the pocket and still keeping his eyes downfield and all of that. But like,
Yes.
it's so amazing that you talk about that. And I think I love what you said too, because I can't agree more that, and I've said it and I'll say it again, that football prepared me. And I guess maybe this is our call. This is our call to, parents who are out there and thinking about, they hear the dangers of football and blah, 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 blah. But like football, nothing prepared me more for combat and more for life, really, than
For sure.
playing football and being in that. And I, played lacrosse too, played other team sports, but there's something that is innate in football that translates to a lot of other things, to combat specifically, and leading men in combat or soldiers in combat. But I love what you say about that. I think that's why it brings us joy that we can pass it on, right? That
Yes.
we can pass it on. And then, you know, we can only do so much, right? Right. Train them in the way in which they will go. Train them in the way in which they will go. Not train them in the way in which we want them to go, not train them in the way in which we think they should go. So, I will say, God bless me with a boy who loves it, who he's in 24/7, 365. He's all in. I don't have to do that's his path, and I'm here to guide him. It sounds like you have, one that's like that as well,
Yeah.
that, man, that's the way in which, and so it's a blessing, right? It's such a blessing to be able to witness it and sit back and, to your point, maybe, enjoy it too. Enjoy it, because it's special when we get to see that somebody pursuing what we pursued and we're passionate about, and having that same energy and love of it.
Yeah, Chad, and you're going through this right now. I think I don't think I could have this perspective without reading the Bible every day.
Yeah.
And I'm actually in a Bible study with my wife and one of our best friends, where it's like a podcast where we're actually reading through the Bible sequentially. And then there's this lady, it's called the Bible Recap, Tara Lee Cobble or something like that, and she kind of like explains it to me, because I still need a little explanation to kind of
Yeah, no,
actually I need
read
a
all
lot
the
of
commentaries.
and so I think what's interesting is we're, kind of trying to pass on these values to kind of these young boys becoming men. You can overdo it, I believe, and I
Yeah.
probably have at some point overdone it.
Yeah.
And you could also be not as engaged as this gift. And so it's a window. It's a window
Yeah.
of opportunity here, where I want to kind of provide enough knowledge to, like you said, kind of they will go in their way, but then
Right.
have enough perspective and awareness to be like, okay, this is going to be the most enjoyable window of I
Yeah.
get to watch it. You know what I mean?
Right.
You and your wife, you guys are together watching this, human kind of find his way through the game of football and become a man. And I just don't want to get to the end of it and be like, oh, I was riding him too much, or get to the end of it and be like, oh, dude, I could have taught you that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
There's this balance, and I don't
Yes.
think I could balance it without being in the Bible every day.
Yeah, that's a really great point. That's such a great point. And to keep it in perspective, a healthy perspective, which we need. And I will say, John, that's probably where I screw up the most, to be honest, especially during the game. I was like a hot mess and so nervous. Now I try not to let it be known on his, but I'm like, golly, why am I such a hot mess during this? Just let him go.
Oh, Chad, I gotta share something with you. So it's there's something unique about a quarterback training a son quarterback. I just thought it was me. I was just like, why can't I coach this kid? Why am I good with it? And I was Lane is working. I was telling you with a private coach in Chicago.
Yeah,
really,
right.
really good. In fact, there's it's a whole style of movement. You
Uh-huh.
see with Burrows and Allen and McCarthy from Michigan.
The whip nation.
Yeah, they're just comfortable throwing off balance, where you and I were told not to make those throws.
Right.
Don't throw back against your body. But here they're you got to get good at throwing back against your body. And so I had a chance to see this amazing coach coaching his son, and have some struggles. And I was like, I'm glad I'm not the only one. So just know, coaching a quarterback from a quarterback,
Yeah.
it's I think that's God being kind of funny with us. Like,
I know. Yeah. It's him pulling the rug out from under us and say, hey, how about you give him to me and not you?
yeah,
Maybe it goes back.
exactly.
Well, it probably goes back to what your initial thing is control.
Yes.
Right. But I also like your point. I mean, there's the pendulum, there's both sides, and we got to be somewhere in that, that happy swing of it where, oh, two hands off. And it's like, well, I just wasted, what he was wanting to do. And then so over the top that it's like, dude, this isn't the right way either. So
And
it's
I think you're calling what you're pushing Christ over fear. I think you're calling as men to step up, no doubt. Like, you have to have a voice with these young boys. Like, you have to.
yeah,
They need it. They
right.
need it. I think we had some. If we're honest with ourselves and we look back, we had a lot of people that were surrounding us. We had angels that were helping guide us and direct us, whether it's your coaches, or whether it's your parents, or whether it's your, friends at West Point. You've talked a lot about, like, we had that. And so if we stay too far back, like, we're really not doing our part that God wants us to do. I think we've got to be clear, and we've got to help them find their purpose. And we got to say, like, that's right, that's wrong. Like, that's actually not okay. That's not the truth. Right.
Right.
And it's uncomfortable. I think society doesn't want to engage in that because it's a little uncomfortable. But
It is. Well, go ahead.
I'm saying if we leave these young minds to, like, not, like, share the values down with them, then, like, are we really doing God's work for them?
I know.
You know what I mean? And it's uncomfortable. So we've got to kind of step in and have that voice. And I think that's a lot of what your call is here. Like, men, we got to pick it up.
Yeah, we do. Well, and I'm glad you must have listened to an early one. Maybe it was the first one while I was introing the show. And it'd probably be healthy for me to go back and listen to that because, yeah, the whole impetus was like, I do see women leading, like Bible studies and the Beth Moores and the Christine Caines, and they're out there. And not that there's not men out there, but maybe not, with the backgrounds that we have, maybe not with the backgrounds we have where we can be authentic, real, transparent, and what we thought was manly or, masculine years and years ago is not really what God sees as masculine and manly, but we still need to be godly, masculine and manly and pass that down to your point. And so, where our screw up, I love what you said, I've often said it said, never make the same mistake twice. I said, well, why should anybody make my mistake once? Why am I not passing that nugget down to somebody so they don't have to make my mistake once? Right. And so that's what the whole point is that we try to, be real and raw and authentic and where our shortcomings were, where we could have gotten better. I think it's hard for men too. Let me ask you this, like, who was it? It was, Patty Mahomes, man. Patty Mahomes had such a good interview because he was like, I don't care about the great plays I make out there. I only care about the couple that I screw up. He's like, those are the ones I can't stand. And it's such a male thought process and maybe a competitive thought process where I do think maybe as men, we need to also be okay and not think that it's cocky or arrogant when we can acknowledge our that boys. For ourselves. And I think our younger ones need to see that. They're like, okay, like I did do that one well, like that rep or that whatever, that situation, that encounter, that was done well, because we don't tend to take that. And I think we always look at, or especially me, I can tend to gravitate towards the negative, whether it's a play, whether it's a work call, whether it's a work situation, whether it's a conversation that didn't go great. I can navigate to the bad ones and pick myself apart. But I think men, we need to share to our youth, our younger ones coming up, that it's okay to also get confidence in the times that you do good.
Yeah, 100%. It reminded me of this concept that I read about years ago, and it's called the warrior poet. Mm-hmm. And I think too much people want to, like, choose one or the other. And I think the modern man, like, has to do both. Mm-hmm. And they can. And I think your audience in particular is uniquely qualified to kind of champion this concept because they're warriors, right? But like, we need warriors. Like, we need men that are willing to step up and do, like, tough work. Like we went and we did, like, to defend the country, or, do kind of gritty work, like, build highways.
Right.
We need, so we need to we need to understand that like a young kid, a young boy has to be able to go out and play. They have to run around and play backyard football, and you can't constrain that masculinity. Whereas we need it, society needs it. But on the other hand, it doesn't mean you can't be a poet. It doesn't mean you can't be humble and have humility and be kind and gentle and, take a lady to a nice, date.
Right.
And we can do both. It's not one or the other.
Yeah.
You can be a warrior and you can be a poet. And the future, I think kind of the values of Christianity come to life when these young kids learn that in modern society, like, you can do both. And so, your audience who is, proven to be warriors, who's now sharing some of their vulnerabilities, who are now coming out and talk about things like mental health and some of the struggles that they have and some of the values that they've gone through, I think really allows others to see, like, it's not one or the other. It's really a balance of both. And I think that's at least what I'm trying to teach some of the younger kids around me.
Well, I love that. And let's go on that. Let's talk about Modern Day Knights.
Yeah.
And when you started that, did you start that initially like for your oldest son, or was this pre you even having kids old enough to coach, or when did that get to fruition?
I can't wait to share that. Like, I can't wait to get your thoughts on this. So I, I had these boys that were growing up, and, my recollection of early days of football, like the kind of third, fourth, fifth grade, those grades, they're blurry. They were kind of messy. It wasn't until like more of the 14, 15, 16-year-old kind of where I was like, okay, like it started to make sense. The equipment fit a little bit better. So I thought, I went to my local community. My kids were playing flag football. And so early on, Chad, you're gonna man, you and I have a connection here. So when we went and played, when remember Coach Barry, and we went from that kind of passing offense, or that running offense was like the passing offense, right?
Right.
And we were really kind of getting advanced in the passing game. And I remember the windows being really tight. And I remember, like, especially my senior year when I was behind you, and like you were teaching me how to kind of throw the receivers open, throw, that hook route, you're throwing it before they even. And so I'm watching my kids play first, second grade flag football, and the fields is super narrow. And I realized, like, holy cow, they're throwing to windows. These are first graders. So I was like, hey, let's keep playing flag. And man, I had everybody was like, you're ruining football. Like, and like you're great creating wimps. And I'm like, no, I'm telling you, trust me, I'm going to create better players. I'm actually going to open the funnel. I'm going to bring more people over time. Don't make parents make a decision at second, third grade. Equipment doesn't fit in many ways. And by the way, let's make great route runners, great quarterbacks, great receivers. Let's teach them how to high point balls. And so my first group was a group of third graders. There was, by the way, no program. So I kind of had to start the program. 8 kids. It grew to 150, 160 kids.
Wow.
We had, have leagues, camps, and then we travel. They travel all over the country. We're getting ready to go down to Florida here in a couple of weeks to play an ESPN National Championship 5 versus 5. 5 teams are going down there, and these kids are good, Chad.
Yeah.
So in my area where we're from, the original group 6 years ago or 7 years ago or so are now freshmen. Yeah. And so in my area where we live in southwest corner of Michigan, not far from Chicago, I can name one kid in the last 20 years. One kid in the last 20 years that played varsity football as a freshman. I didn't play. I didn't play until my sophomore year, and that was considered early.
Yeah.
This year, 8 of the Modern Day Knights across 4 different school districts played, and many started as 14-year-old freshmen on varsity in skill positions. And the coaches are like, we've never seen like that level of hand development, that level of like understanding of the defense, because we're sitting there teaching the kids how to read man zone defenses. And so I kind of had an hypothesis that now it turned out to be a good way to develop football players through, if they want to go into tackle, go into tackle. If they want to kind of hold out, like, flag is not a bad thing. You're extending. I think you said your boy, I don't know if I caught that, your boy's first tackle was 6th grade. So
6th grade. Yeah.
Most of yours are 6th and 7th grade. Yeah. So like, you're kind of, and so it's turned out to be really impactful. And then on top of that, Chad, we really want to talk to like the kids about, like, it's not just about football wins and losses. It's like, we have 5 values: hard work, teamwork, positive attitude, fundamentals, and then discipline. Very much kind of the what you might hear walking around like the Army football fields, right? Those kind of values that we can
Right.
all attach to and start to develop their character. And through the game of football, we've been able to I think have some influence on kids that maybe set them up for a more productive high school experience and maybe more productive members of our society by kind of holding them accountable to these values through the game of football.
I love that. And I think what's huge about that is while it's probably very difficult because you had to start it from the ground up,
Yes.
that had to be a challenge. But I love flag when it's done right, kind of
Yes.
like the 7-on-7 model for like
100%.
summer. When it's done like that, like we had flag here in Ohio, and it was a poorly designed,
Yeah. It's got to be done right.
Yeah, it was gimmicky where quarterback couldn't run if he's blitz, and then he's just back there like so. But when it's done properly, you're basically just doing 7-on-7. You're
100%.
developing those skills and getting that. And I mean,
and that's Chad, that's it, 100%. I think
Yeah.
when Barry brought that offense in, we were hammering 7-on-7. That's all we were doing.
right. Yeah, that's all you had to do.
Remember the training we were doing in the summer? So in my mind, I was like, we're doing 7-on-7. That's what this is. It's all about like route combinations. And so, so it's turned out to be something, positive on the community and the kids.
Well, and I have to say, I do believe the Modern Day Knights logo is very sharp. It looks somewhat familiar too. I don't know who the marketing guy was for that.
Well played.
Sweet, huh? I love
I
that.
thought you'd like that.
Yeah, dude, it was sweet. Well, hey, we have come up on the hour. I mean, it's just been a pleasure. What I love about coming on here, John, is just, yes, this is a live show. It's a podcast. It'll be hung on all the podcast players later this afternoon, but it's just a conversation of you and I and what the Lord has done in our lives, what Jesus has done in our lives, with blessing us with our spouses, with blessing us with our children, with navigating the highs and the lows of life, but then able to come on and talk and discuss that and have a conversation with you is extra special, so that we get to catch up. So I thank you for coming on today, man.
Yeah, Chad, I got to tell you, thank you, man. I've been looking forward to this. And just kind of getting to know you through West Point and following your career after, and kind of just crossing paths in Iraq. I'm glad we got a chance to talk about that. Like I'm a huge fan, and I know you're not gonna like ever probably feel the full impact of what you're making on people. But like seeing you do what you're doing, it causes someone like myself to kind of pick up my game and to, try to, like you said earlier, grab more people with me. I know your audience is going to, would agree with me 100%. So, man, you're a role model, you're a leader, and you're someone I've always looked up to. And I appreciate the hour to spend with you. And man, we got to connect on your son. I get you some film. I want to check that out.
Yep, I'll send you some. I got to check out Landon's more too. I got to see a couple highlights before I had to do a couple work emails. But I appreciate all that you shared just there, John. It means the world to me, and it just means the world that we can come on after this many years of having not talked live, and just come on and just it just shows the relationship that we do have, the connections that we do have. Ultimately, it's because of him, but also the bonds that we have through the shared challenges and struggles that we went through together. Forges a bond that's hard to replace. So I'm glad I have that with you, buddy.
Thank you, Chad.
All right, man. Have a good one.
Talk to you soon. Thanks for your time.
Sounds good. Thanks. All right. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, that was episode 39 of Christ Over Fear today, January 3rd, 2024, with Jon Hall, my Army football teammate and quarterback. And I hope you enjoyed this show today. We will be back next month, the first Wednesday of February, with our next guest in episode 40. So until next time, continue to fight the good fight. Thanks. See ya.